Hello, everyone. We're here for another astrobiography. And today we're looking at Serena Williams. We just did a video about her sister, Venus. Now, Jenny, who the heck is Serena Williams?
She's another amazing tennis player. Another woman who broke many, many barriers, both in terms of her tennis performance, but also by the fact of breaking into a very white sport. And her sister are, I'm sure they're the two of the most, or maybe the most well-known tennis players in the world. I mean, they're incredible athletes, both of them. But what is so interesting is how different their charts are. They're fairly close in age, but it's really fun to kind of do a study, and they're both very successful, but their motivations and their drives are so different. So that's what we're going to do today, is just kind of look at Serena's chart, and at the end we'll touch on her relationship with a sister, how to look at that in the chart, and then also we'll just briefly touch on the father figure, because this is based on that movie King Richard, which is really about their dad, Richard Williams, and how he pushed the girls when they were kids and really pushed them into this career and fought all kinds of battles with sort of hoity-toity like white people that are just like, this isn't the place for your girls. And so you should watch the movie, right? I mean, did you enjoy it, Lori?
I did. I enjoyed it a lot. And as Jenny knows, I'm not a big sports fan. I kind of resist. Yeah, I resist sports. She made me do it. But yeah, it's been fascinating. And I really did enjoy the movie a lot. And, realizing just the awareness of the significance of these two women and how, their lives and what they've done is really significant. And it is really interesting in the charts. You've studied the charts a lot more than I have. But we are going to go through our normal little process of starting out looking at the midheaven, because that is what people are known for from a distance. And none of us are friends with Serena or Venus Williams. So we're going to start out looking at the midheaven, and then we're going to look at the ascendant in terms of, okay, what are their personalities like? If you were friends with them, what are you going to see? And then we'll just kind of talk a little bit about the sun and the moon in the chart. And then, like you said, we'll go into talking about the sibling and the father and their influence. So yeah, this is going to be fun. One more thing before we open up that chart. If you have not subscribed to our channel yet, please do so. Please like this video. Please share it with your friends and leave us a comment. We really appreciate anything that will help our video be seen by other people. And you can find Jenny at hiddenpathastrology.com. You can find me at astrolore.org. Now, let's open the chart and look at it.
Okay. All right. So here is Serena's chart. So Serena is the younger sister. We looked at Venus's chart last time. We thought it was only fair. You got to start with the older sibling. So Serena is not too much younger. It's like a little bit over a year younger than Venus. So, but still very, very different chart. So I guess we'll start right up there, as we said, with the midheaven. And
I have to pause for 1 second.
Yeah.
I just realized how close she was born to Beyonce.
Yes. That is
I just realized that there's a lot of similarities, actually.
Yeah, you're right. Because that it was just a couple days, right?
No, she was born earlier in the month, but she was born in September of 81. And it's so interesting. Many charts I've been looking at recently that are in this little combination of Libra planets. So anyway, on to Serena.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. I haven't quite made that connection, but we're certainly looking at that big chunk of Libra planets in the 6th house in this case. But we want to start with the midheaven. So,
right.
The midheaven is in Capricorn. What do we think about a Capricorn midheaven, Lori?
Well, the first thing we're going to think is that her career, her vocation is going to be very serious. And there's a level of maturity in it, and a lot of work involved in getting there. It's also, with Capricorn there, one of the really important things I would say is the issue of integrity.
Yeah.
And
Mhm.
of course, that Capricorn is ruled by Saturn, which is one of the planets in that gathering.
Yeah, and interesting how Saturn's actually squaring that midheaven. So that's just, that means there's a bit more of a
Oh,
challenge to it.
yes.
So it's going to
Yes.
be a little more of a reach. But I think, yeah, the other things about Saturn ruling that I think about right away is Saturn's a slower moving planet. And so this is the long, hard, slow determination of putting in the work, putting in the effort day after day, getting out and into the trenches of putting in the time. And I was also just thinking about how just remembering that Capricorn is an earth sign. And I always think with Capricorn that it's that ability to move the mountain, but it has to do it boulder by
Slowly.
boulder
Yeah.
with a
Yeah.
lot of intensity. It can often be good at delegating and getting help with that, but it really is going to put in a lot of that work. So it can be associated with mastery, like mastering a very difficult skill.
Yeah.
So
And another thing that I want to say, because Libra rules that midheaven, another piece to look at is, the aspects Saturn's making. And I just couldn't help but notice that little sextile from the Mars. Mars is doing the long, slow slog of learning this work, this effort. And Mars is really supporting it from the fourth house, the family.
yeah, yeah. I see some tension here, or not tension, but like trade-offs between doing the sports and then but wanting to have a family life. And actually, there is a documentary about Serena as well. I think it's on HBO Max that actually goes very much into exactly this issue because she's having a child, and that's part of what that documentary is. So that's a good side point.
Huh.
And I think that the interesting thing about Saturn in this chart is it's actually, I mean, it's in a difficult house. Like the sixth house is considered a challenging house, but it is in a sign that Saturn's quite happy to be in. Saturn does pretty well in Libra.
Yeah.
So that it's Saturn's quite powerful in that position. I think it's probably the most powerful planet in that sixth house, wouldn't you say?
Probably. That sixth house is such an interesting gathering of planets there. But yes, I mean, Saturn's happy in Libra. And the fact that Saturn is in Libra, I think really adds to, you would think with Capricorn on the midheaven, there's an element of, I've got to do it on my own. And yet Saturn brings in the cooperation.
Yeah, that is funny.
Yeah. Yeah. And Saturn squaring it, it's like part of the work is the cooperation.
Yeah. And I think you just reminded me. I mean, one of the things, like in learning some of the more Hellenistic astrology techniques and finding out that the sixth house is not such a great house, and I just want to comment on that. It's like it is, that is true. That is how it's characterized. But what you can think of in terms of applying it to how people use it, it just means that she had to work really damn hard to make this go, and she has worked her ass off in tennis for many years, and that's very, very apparent. So there's this real ability to kind of get to work and get it done and keep going back and keep going back and keep going back, and you will see that if you watch any of the films or documentaries we're talking about.
Yeah.
So
The sixth house is often equated with things like sports.
yeah, routine, daily practice.
Yeah, routine, day-to-day practice. And again, like we talked about when we were looking at Venus's chart, just the image that always stands out, in one of the images that really stands out in my head around that movie is those two girls working in the middle of the night in the rain, practicing. And you look at this gathering, the hard work of Saturn, the expansion of Jupiter, and then the power dynamic that Pluto brings in there, and the mind constantly going back and doing the work, doing the effort, and not to mention the fact that the sun is also in that house. Although it's not really part of the gathering.
Yeah,
a little
it's a little bit
separate.
separate. Yeah.
Yeah.
But I also just like how just sometimes astrology is very literal, and here you have Libra, and Libra's the sign of rivals. Libra must have a partner to play
Yeah.
off against, to wrestle with, to I mean, it cuts both ways, where it wants to be seen and liked and all those things, but it also, the thought of the tennis match in a way is the perfect way to think
Perfect
about
Libra.
Libra.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's really
So,
true.
yeah. So I
And then
love
to
that.
actually, that is, if you think about that, the tennis match, and you look at all those planets there in Libra and think about this woman,
Ooh, boy.
yeah, it's the power, the expansion, the work, the effort, oh,
Yeah. And
yeah,
when you see one of her tennis balls comes exploding at you at your head, like, woo, it's intense. You gotta, they're just, she's just a powerhouse. So strong.
yeah, yeah, yeah.
Um, well,
Wow,
have we
awesome.
covered the,
I think we've
midheaven?
covered the midheaven.
Yeah.
All of that is part of, that's how we know her. And
Yeah.
that's how she will go down in tennis history, with all of this power dynamics and all that she has learned over the course of time, all the work she's put in,
Yeah.
and the integrity that
Yeah.
she's brought to the sport. Wow,
Yeah.
that's really powerful. Okay, to make all those lines go away, and let's think about the ascendant. And this, we're going to think in terms of, the personality. Who is she if you walked into a room and met her? Well, she's got Taurus rising, which is interesting. Her sister had Libra rising, so they are both of them, on the level of their personalities, is ruled by Venus. But boy,
Yeah.
their Venuses are different, aren't they?
Yeah. And I think it's interesting for me thinking about the Taurus ascendant. So just think about, it's another earth sign. So she's got an earth sign on her midheaven and an earth sign on her ascendant. So this is somebody who, material security is something to think about. There is a desire to have those material security needs met. And so there's that piece of it. There's also, Taurus can be just incredibly stubborn and relentless as a fixed sign. So I think you put those two things together, and this is just a very earthy way of wanting to have an impact in the practical, observable realms, in the tangible realms. So I think that just to start with that.
And it's also just the physicality of Taurus.
Yeah.
The
broad
beauty,
shoulders.
the beauty and physicality. Yeah, I mean, and these women both are just gorgeous women.
Yeah.
Powerful.
Yeah, they really are, and you should check out, like, just even a tennis match with them if you haven't. Yeah, I think
It's
that's
interesting. Yeah, that Venus ruling not only the ascendant, but ruling all of those planets in Libra.
Yeah.
And that's, in our culture, we, at least people my age, we were taught to think that what meant beauty was little, frail, and white. And this woman is so gorgeous, but you've got those dynamics of Pluto, Jupiter, Saturn. We are not talking a little frail white girl. We are talking about a powerhouse of a woman. This is not a girl. I mean, I think she must have just been strong and powerful from the time she was a little girl.
Yeah.
It's probably one of the things her dad saw in her was just that strength, because she had that long before she got on a tennis court.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting too, because in terms of their careers, Venus, their dad really pushed Venus forward first. I mean, she was the older daughter, but Venus was the one they were kind of putting their money on earlier on, in that. And Serena still played, but she was kind of off to the side and not in the spotlight. And so Venus kind of made her splash first, and then Serena really came up from the back, and at this point has won more awards and matches and so on and so forth, and made even more of a splash than Venus, which is incredible, because Venus has done a lot. So that's something that's cool, is that she was a little more of, I would say, the underdog as between the siblings as the younger player. And she just, it seemed like from the movie too, she just like played. She just kept playing. She didn't seem to get, I mean, I don't know what was going on behind the scenes, but
Right.
you didn't see that she was outwardly
Well,
infuriated by that, but
that
but I would
Libra
say
is
the
trying
motivation
to,
is quiet. Yeah.
yeah, that Libra's trying to make things look good.
Mhm.
Libra's such a funny sign because that
Yeah.
whole idea of balance, equanimity, trying to make things look good, but underneath there is a rod of steel in Libra. It is a cardinal sign, and it's not going to be pushed over, even though it
No, it's
might
going to throw an
look
elbow.
right. Right. Right.
Yeah.
This is an incredibly powerful chart.
Yeah. And then let's just talk about Venus, the
Ooh,
ruling planet of Taurus. So this
ooh.
is the planet that's responsible for running the show. It's the that rules the whole chart. So Venus in Scorpio in Hellenistic speak is not really a very good placement for it. It's just that it's going to have to look at Mars. This place it doesn't want to look, because Venus wants to be sort of mellow and pretty and keeping balance. But in this case, because it's in Scorpio, it's a Mars ruled sign. It has a combativeness to it that's interesting.
Yeah.
And I think that, but at the same time, Venus is in the seventh house. That is a very powerful placement for this planet.
Yeah.
It's got a lot of clout because of that placement. So it's very interesting thinking about that. And I just kept thinking of the deep, intense desire for, I don't know, profound intensity in relationships. And if you think about her playing a tennis match, you're going to see that intensity. That's one way you're going to see it.
And yeah, it's
Yeah.
so interesting that her battle on the court being, against her sibling, fourth house, and that Mars that rules Venus is square. They're in a square aspect to each other. They are in a challenge. They're in a battle here. It's
Yeah.
fascinating.
Yeah. And my take on
Fascinating.
this too is later on, if you watch the Serena documentary about her having a child, you see the intensity with her partner, and she has an experience where she almost dies during the childbirth. She
Oh,
has a pulmonary embolism, and it's
oh,
very dangerous. And so you
oh.
see all of this powerhouse woman who's shown up in the worldview, has been in all these tennis matches, traveled the world, and all of a sudden, all that intensity is about how to survive that birth experience. And
Wow.
then having to give herself time to rest, and she really really struggles. She's like trying to pick up the baby within a couple days. It's like, oh whoa honey, you almost died, like it's just so you
Well,
really see that intensity.
she's
Mhm.
so accustomed to her body being so powerful and strong, day-to-day routine, that sixth house. I've got to watch that documentary. I haven't watched it yet.
Yeah, because it shows you too. Like, I mean, it's funny because you brought up, Lori, how the Libra always wants to make it look good even when it isn't, and that Venus and Scorpio does rule all those Libra planets as well as the whole chart. What I saw in the documentary was there seems to be a really profound love between her and her partner. Like that's what it shows up as, and that she really, it appears that she feels met by him. It's interesting, but also that she is just such a big personality and
Ooh.
so much strength and personality. He's also kind of in the background a little bit, which is, I think, would be necessary.
Yeah, I would think would be
So,
necessary.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah,
I mean, if you think about that seventh house being ruled by both Mars and Pluto being in the mix of this, I I would
yeah,
not expect her to be an easy person to be in relationship with. And
yeah,
yeah, I mean, this is a powerful woman.
yeah.
If she's going
She's
to be in a partnership, that partner is going to really have to know how to manage themselves in the face of this incredibly powerful person. She
yeah.
also, all her planets are over in this side of the chart. Relationship and learning through that is so crucial to her. We've gotten a little far away from the ascendant, but this is
Yeah.
fascinating. I love
Well,
this.
yeah, it's hard not to go into Venus just because I mean, it does rule the ascendant, and
Right.
there's a lot going on with that Venus. But I agree. I think we're ready to shift gears and talk a little bit more about just the sun and the moon, huh?
Yeah, we
Yeah.
haven't even mentioned the moon here yet.
Yeah, there's that.
Yeah, I mean, we've talked a little bit about the sun in Libra, that desire to make things look good, that sun ruling the fourth house, the family, and the day-to-day routines within the context of the family being such a significant place of learning and growth for her, which clearly has been her path. Um, so, that's really the energy at the core of the chart with the sun there.
Yeah. Yeah, it
Mm.
is. And the moon is interesting because in a lot of ways, the moon's in the fifth house. It's in Virgo. So Virgo, I see Virgo a lot with athletes. There's a precision thing with Virgo.
Uh-huh.
And again, we're back to an earth sign. We have an earth midheaven, an earth ascendant, and we have an earth moon. So there's the real, the wrestling with the tangible world is a thing here with all that earth. It must make an impact in practical terms. And that's something she's able to do. But I really see that.
And yet,
that thing,
I
thing.
just wanted to throw in that moon is
Yeah.
actually the only planet in the chart that's in Earth.
That's true. Yeah.
Anyway, I just had
No,
to throw
that's
that out.
an interesting
Yeah.
point. But I just think of that. And then the fifth house, I mean, here's this creative act, her giving of love, which is how she plays sports. I mean, there is some risk taking and some skin in the game in the fifth house, for sure. And it is a creative component. And with the Virgo, there's a precision to that creativity that has to happen. And it's so interesting how that pops up with so many athletes. Simone Biles has a bunch of Virgo. There's another male snowboarder that does. I can think of Alex Honnold has a Virgo moon. So he's a climber with precision is like so important. So it's fascinating to see that again.
And then that moon also rules the third house, siblings. That, the relationship with the sibling is part of how she develops that precision.
Nice.
Yeah.
And the other thing too is that this is a balsamic moon. So this is at the very end of the moon cycle. The moon is almost reached back to the sun, but this is the part where there's a little bit of a shamanic journey associated with the balsamic moon, like the life path that really is about being in those deep dark spaces and distilling the wisdom from the cycle before and bringing it forward into the new cycle. That's what anyone with a balsamic moon is sort of charged with, this type of information, like having to distill all the information from the previous cycle and make it usable and meaningful and helpful. So
it's like the very end of the plant cycle where all the energy is going into developing that seed form to pass on.
And soil.
That's interesting, and I might be going totally off path. But it reminds me, or it makes me think, that moon also is ruling her north node. And the one thing we didn't talk about when we were talking about the midheaven that I want to revisit is the fact that in whole sign house system, the midheaven is separate from the cusp of the 10th house. And in this case, it is in the 9th, which would suggest some sort of teaching component maybe at some point in the career. But there's, the movement is toward more communication, more toward the home, more inward over the course of the life.
Absolutely.
Yeah, it's interesting to have that moon ruling the third house and the south node.
And also to have Mars, which we've talked about being a potent planet, also ruling the 12th. So that brings in back to I made that comment about the shamanic journey. It seems to me like the purpose of this life is, from the astrology point of view, is the going inward and the learning. There's a big learning with the midheaven in the 9th house and that kind of the balsamic moon. And then because also the balsamic moon really talks about, we'll get into the sibling, her sibling Venus, and like what learning is available through that relationship. And there's with the moon in the 5th house, like that's a pretty sweet placement for the moon to be in that that particular house of the giving of love, and to
Yeah.
have that tied in with their sibling. But
Yeah.
I agree with you, Lori, absolutely. I think this is an inwardly facing chart. The point is
Yeah.
not the profession per se. It's more deepening
Right.
down and getting into the roots. And
Yeah. Yeah.
yeah,
It's like there is something, you know, she spends so much of herself learning through the profession, through that, but ultimately it's an inward journey. And she so requires relationships to get there.
yeah, yeah,
You know, between the Libra and just the focus on the, you know, the west side of the chart, there's
hmm,
so much in terms
yeah,
of these relationships, whether they be with a partner, a sibling, her father, you know, these
yeah.
relationships are so crucial in her learning and going inward.
Yeah. Um,
Fascinating.
do you want to talk a little bit more about this, the third house and her relationship with her sibling Venus?
Well, I'm afraid that before we were supposed to get there, we already got there.
Well, I was just gonna, yeah. I mean, we've kind of mentioned it, so we can just kind of fill that out a little bit, and
Yeah,
yeah,
I think, you know, with the if we're going to think about sibling relationships, the place to go is always to the third house. You know, people think about the third house as the area of communication. I think that, and the day-to-day, not the day-to-day routines like the sixth house is about, but more the day-to-day communications or the day-to-day functioning of the mind, the
mm,
you know, the little travels to the grocery store. You know, we think about those kind of things with the third house. But I think, you know, communication and siblings, all those things are kind of, you know, we learn how to communicate with our siblings if we have them. We don't learn how to communicate when we go to school or in our relationships with our parents, unless we're an only child. We learn how to communicate sitting on the rugs playing games with our siblings. That's where we learn it. So that third house is so important regarding siblings. And with her moon ruling it, clearly she loves her siblings. She knows how to give love in a very specific way, I would think. And
mm.
yeah, so there's a real emotional connection there.
Yeah,
Uh,
yeah. I'd read this as just like that, having her relationship with Venus just being something very helpful in the years, um, and you got to contrast it a little bit with the other place you might look to siblings, is going to be the seventh house, just because it's that one-on-one relationship that at some point, you know, them growing up together, that was the, you know, would be where that connection could be seen. So the intensity again of the Venus in Scorpio, and the intensity of like having a sister who can withstand what Serena needed, you know. So I think that that's another
right.
lovely dimension of their relationship, that third house, the moon being satisfied, as you said, and then just adding in the needing some intensity to it, and having her, I mean, they have to play each other in many different competitions, and like it's pretty interesting to think about. Can you imagine how that'd be, like having to play a really intense game in front of the world against your sibling who you also love? I mean, this
Right.
is
And
a
it's
lot
not
to,
like, yeah, it's not like they're playing golf together. You know, this
yeah,
is a brutal sport. They are in competition, in
yeah,
serious battle mode, which,
yeah,
you know, you see in that Venus square Mars. But it's so interesting. If you look at this moon ruling that third house, it's trining the midheaven. So there you have that sibling is so connected
nice.
with the career. But then you also, things are not as they appear to be. You know,
Mhm.
when you see those siblings in a battle on the court and people think, oh my God, they hate each other now because they're battling it out. Well,
No, they
the
don't.
square says to me, things are not as they appear to be.
Yeah. And actually,
That's
I
so
think
interesting.
tennis is a wonderful way to understand how to really understand what a rival is, and how a rival
Mm,
can also be a source of profound love, because what happens is you both force each other to play your absolute best. When you're both really good and you're really at that rival level, then you hit to your opponent's weak point and they have to, you know, dive on the side of the court they're not as used to or whatever. And like, so it really forces both parties to play their absolute best, and that is amazing. And I think that that's what you can think of. It's not enemies. Rivals is a different thing, but it's something where you really bring the best of your potential out in each other. And that's something that you can see that with her sister. It's so cool. I love that about their charts. Yeah.
That's amazing, isn't it? I just remembered as we were talking about this, we did one of our early astrobiographies was Billie Jean King.
Oh yeah.
I just thought of that. Isn't that funny?
Yeah.
Okay, so you want to talk about Dad a little bit?
Yeah, let's throw that in. Let's revisit. So with Venus, we kind of looked at there being a pretty difficult relationship, a lot of drive being forced upon her from kind of behind the scenes. With Serena, I think we see something different. I feel my take on this is just that with the sun applying to a conjunction with Saturn, which is a hard placement.
What are we going to hold on? I'm sorry to interrupt you, Jenny. But when we think about father, what's the first thing we look at?
I was going to look at Saturn.
Okay.
But you could also
I just wanted
to
the 10th house.
Yeah, no, that's good. I mean, parents usually live in the 4th and the 10th house, usually when the person's younger. Some astrologers say the 10th house is the more visible parent, which would most certainly be her father in this case.
Most certainly, yes, yes.
4th house, the more private parent, and then Saturn is definitely a place we're going to look to the father figure because it's the authority in the chart and it's the discipline and all those things. So
that's what I was really trying to get at is, I mean, when I think of father and look at a chart, I'm always looking at Saturn first, personally.
Yeah, me too.
That's where I look first. Yeah.
Yeah. Thanks for pausing me so that I could not just blather on before people knew the hell we were doing. What is interesting here is Saturn does also rule the 10th house. Saturn's one of the rulers of Aquarius. So
not the 10th. Oh yeah, the 10th house and the midheaven. Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we have that. So I kind of feel like my take on this is just that Saturn's in a pretty good position in this chart. And so I see it, even though it was difficult, it helped her get where she needed to go. You know, that pressure was something she could actually deal with and manage. And it got her to where she needed to go. And that I wonder if more things she might struggle with is feeling a sense of being a bit more like her father, which maybe not what she wants, or perceives as one, or maybe she's made more peace of that. But that's sort of a little bit of a take I have on it. What do you think?
Well, I think that the father in looking at the Saturn, let me see, how do I want to wrap my brain around this? You know, clearly the father is this huge, powerful, dynamic presence.
Yeah.
And what does he do? He, on a day-to-day routine level, makes her go do her thing. And it forces her to create and become who she is in the outer world. I mean, it really, in a lot of ways, it's pretty damn simple.
Yeah.
It's pretty damn simple. It's pretty direct. Here she is, 6th house, day-to-day routine, go out in the rain and work your butt off, whether you like it or not. And that Saturn being ruled by Venus, squaring the Mars, you know, it really is very simple. Her father, and this always brings up these questions, you know, what if she had been born in a different family? You know, I mean, this is what she was born into, and this is such an amazing dynamic.
Yeah.
And it makes me want to look at Beyonce's chart and say, okay, who's Beyonce's dad? I mean, obviously it's going to be a little bit different. The lineups won't be the same. There's probably not a square to the midheaven, you know, all the rest of it. But just this little gathering, but whenever you see, this is what I want to think about here too, is when you see this kind of a gathering, for those of you that are watching, I think it's always beneficial to think about it in terms of this chart is a snapshot. What was it? I think I said recently, you know, it's like a picture of a dance. Nothing is really static. In this split second, it's static. but what's moving toward what? And I think I interrupted you when you were starting to talk about that the sun is approaching Saturn. You know, it's going there. It's like, okay, I've got to learn from this gathering that I'm facing. I have to move in this direction. And Saturn, you know, I mean, I don't know, you know, any one of these planets might be, well, they're probably not getting ready to go retrograde because whatever. But, you know, Jupiter has passed over Saturn. Saturn and Jupiter are both approaching Pluto. Mercury has just passed over the bunch. Kind of, you know, thinking in those terms, if you can start wrapping your head around that process of watching those planets move and thinking what they're learning from those relationships as they go. I don't know if I've gone off on a crazy tangent.
No, I think, I mean, I was thinking too, just for those of you watching this, like, so the sun is applying to the conjunction of Saturn. That means it's moving towards it, it's approaching it. And those are the stronger conjunctions. It is an 8-degree orb there just about, but it's the sun. So that is a very prevalent connection. You could definitely say there's a Saturn sun conjunction in this chart, but in the process that Lori's talking about, it's working toward, it's not there yet. But that is part of the expression of that Libra sun, because that's its only real aspect, is its reach out to Saturn. So thinking in terms of the sun being, you know, the essential character or the core self, and like it needing to firm up its identity by reaching out towards the sun. This is kind of how I read that.
And it would be very curious to know, you know, what shifted in the dynamics with the dad when this little girl was almost 8 years old.
Yeah, you got
it.
And I think that's
just thinking in terms of secondary progressions when the sun would have reached Saturn, you know, those when planets are all grouped like this, that's the other thing you can really work with is the progressions. But that's another
like
whole
times. Yeah, that's a whole different.
That's a whole nother video.
Because the one other thing I did want to mention from your talking about Saturn was you did mention that Venus rules it, and I just wanted to just kind of pass on that. Kind of draws in the idea we talked about how important relationships were. So the father created a great deal of stress. This is what needs to happen, and part of that package was, and you're really going to need these relationships. It underscores that theme of having those powerful relationships to help her get where she needs to go. So that's pretty cool.
And another thing that what you're saying made me think of is that also, you know, some of that drive that she was willing to take on from her dad was probably tied in with, you talked about the importance of finances and, you know, that kind of desire for resources.
Yeah.
That Venus's rulership of those planets also speaks to that. You know, part of her, like, okay, I'm going to accept this push in this direction because it's going to get me there.
Yeah. Yeah. And I recently just saw a picture of her in just an absolutely insane dress and outfit, like at the Met Gala, where she's just this long pink fuzzy thing. It's crazy. So I cracked up when I saw it because I mean, both of these siblings have done a lot. They're both impressive powerhouses. They've broken some barriers. They're showing the way for young girls of color, that there's a way forwards, you know, in our very biased society.
And that, I'm so glad you said just that. Her midheaven being in that 9th house, she doesn't have to actively be a teacher. She embodies that. Her career embodies that inspiration for younger people coming up. That's really sweet. Awesome.
Cool. I think we're wrapping it up. What do you say?
I think I'm ready to wrap it up. I think these two women are amazing. And I'm definitely going to go watch that other documentary.
I mean, definitely part of the reason why I wanted to do this with you is because of the barriers they've broken. I wanted to kind of highlight that. So thank you for doing it with me.
Thank you, Jenny. This has been great fun. I can't wait to see who we do next.
Sounds great. Thanks,
Bye-bye.
everybody. Bye.